Now that we've talked about some of the different blending techniques, I'm going to go into depth on the blending technique that I like to use that I think is easier for people, shows a better differentiation in shading. There's a more extreme definition of light versus dark and contrast, which makes your image more interesting. I'm going to be using colors from the kit this month: E00, E02, E11 from a past kit, RV34, and E93. I'm going to start with my darkest color, which is going to be my E02. And the wonderful thing about these flourishes images is they have places where you should be shading built in. It's really great for beginners, and I actually started with a ton of these. And you can see the lines are heaviest on top, and then you can see right there and in between. There you go. Now we're going to go in with the E11. Now I'm using my modified feather technique, which is I'm blending, feather blending up, which is the emphasis is placed on here where there's more ink, and up so less ink goes. And then I'm blending into that next color as opposed to blending in a circular motion. Then going in with my E00, once again, you can see I'm blending into that color, and I'm reserving white here. Every time you go over a Copic marker with the same color, it darkens it by half a color. So the reason we reserve the white is these colors blend while this color is going to be lightest in the middle, and I'm going to just do a very, very light stroke there to reserve the white. Now I may go through this and say, I don't think that there is enough darkness or enough contrast, and that's okay. I can go back and add a little bit more dark. If I'm concerned I'll add too much dark, I can use the tip-to-tip blending method. I would go back over it with more of a side blending. I like that because less ink goes on, but I'm still reserving that area in the middle. Putting the least amount of ink there, so that there's actually a real differentiation. You can see the shading. There's a shadow and a highlight. You need to think of each of these images in pieces. If you look at this piece, this is the next piece, or else it can be kind of overwhelming. Coloring this image all at the same time, like if I were to color the entire shell at the same time, would make it difficult because the colors wouldn't blend well because they would start to dry. So again, I start with the E2, going back in with your E11. Once your markers dry, they start to leave harsh lines. Back in. And shading and blending to me is a process. You may have to do it several times to get the look that you want. But that's a great thing about these markers, is it allows you to go over as many times as you need to and add as much highlight and low light as you can. Okay. That in. And as we get smaller here, we may want to start thinking about using one of the other blending techniques, using the tip-to-tip method if it's getting too small and you're feeling uncomfortable. Okay, and I'll show you that on this next one. So now I'm going to still use my dark to light. Go in here. I'm going to be a little bit more frugal with my color application, so I don't want to make it too dark. Okay. Now, instead of going in with my E11, I'm going to take my E02 and E11 and do tip-to-tip blending. And once again, I use very little pressure on the tip of my marker. I'm putting the blending in there, and you can tell I was able to reserve a lot of the white because I didn't have to put that on the paper. I used tip-to-tip blending, and that tip of that brush side of your Copic is very, very little, and it gets into all those detail areas nicely. Now I'm going to put in the E00 here. And you can see that I maintained that contrast. I think one of the more difficult things when you first start using your Copic markers is putting too much color down. And not reserving enough of the white color so that you can see a differentiation among color and see a contrast, because it's contrast that makes your images look more interesting. Going in with the darkest color first, once again using that feather blending. And this is all one piece, so I'm going to go ahead and follow this down. And you can see where the little lines are showing shading on this image. Going with my E11, blending into it, the color. And then with my E00. Reserving the white, and then going back over very lightly. Okay, we just have one more area to color here before we get to the pink portion of the shell. Going with our darkest color. And you can tell the darkest lines are here on these cool flourishes stamps to help you know where the dark color will go. Just use the tip of your marker. You don't need that much color. The less color you have down and the smoother of an application, the easier it is to blend the colors together. Okay. Now I'm going to go with my lightest color, the E00, blend, reserving white to go over really lightly. I'm going to use the side of my marker now. Okay. Now I found a couple colors I think are really awesome for the inside, and colors I typically wouldn't have put together but was experimenting that look just like the inside of a shell. I'm going to use my RV 34, which is in the kit this month, and adding it in as the dark color where you see the dark lines here. And then go in with my E93. I'm going to add a little bit more, and this is a great thing about these markers, you can add more. I want a little bit more contrast. You can blend together. Now, at this point, you see a lot of highlights and lowlights. What I'm going to do, and what I do all the time, and I love to use, is my Ink Essentials opaque pen in order to add any highlights in any areas that I want to be seen, to pick up the person's eye. I think one of the areas is going to be right here. There may be right here. It's where the light hits the hardest. And you can do that in all these if you want. Sorry if you heard my stomach grumbling. I forgot to eat breakfast this morning. And you can see that just a little bit of this opaque pen, the Ink Essentials pen, really adds a highlight that picks up your eye and to accentuate those portions that you left and reserved your white for. Next tutorial, we're going to be working on finding your light source and using this blending technique on how to color based upon where the light is coming from. We're going to be making a template in order to help us with that. Thank you so much. This is Lisa Futch for Paper Maniacs. My blog is creativecanines.blogspot.com.